My daughter-in-law smiled at me across the casket and whispered, "The house goes to market by Friday." My son didn't even flinch. He just nodded and checked his phone. That was the moment I understood. They hadn't come to bury my husband. They had come to collect. The funeral flowers were still fresh. The condolence cards were still stacked unopened on the entryway table. The priest's words hadn't even finished echoing through the church before the call started. Lawyers, realtors, contractors. And somewhere between the eulogy and the graveside prayer, my family had already divided up 53 years of my life into line items on a spreadsheet I was never meant to see. My name was not on that spreadsheet, not once. I found out later from the housekeeper, a quiet woman named Rosa, who had worked for us for 11 years and cried more genuinely at that funeral than anyone who shared our blood. She told me over tea the morning after, hands wrapped around her mug, eyes down, voice low. They had a meeting, she said, the night before the funeral, in the dining room, with a real estate agent. While I had been upstairs, still in my black dress, still holding the rosary my husband gave me on our 40th anniversary, his family was downstairs pricing the rugs. I sat with that information for a long time. I let it settle into my chest like cold water. And then, I did what I had always done in the hardest moments of my life. I got very, very quiet. And I started to remember. My name is Margaret Elaine Caulfield. I'm 71 years old. I have outlived a husband, a business partner, a best friend, and now apparently the patience of everyone who once called me family. And if you think this is a story about a sad old woman who got left behind, I need you to keep listening. Because I spent 40 years being underestimated by people far smarter than the ones who tried to erase me. And not one of them succeeded, not a single one. But let me start where it actually started. Not at the funeral, not at the will reading, not even at the lawyer's office where everything finally came undone for them. Let me start 22 years ago, in a kitchen that smelled like fresh paint and anxiety. The night my husband almost lost everything he had ever built. His name was Robert James Caulfield. Tall man, quiet voice, the kind of person who made rooms feel steadier just by walking into them. He had built Caulfield Logistics from a single truck and a borrowed warehouse into a regional freight operation with contracts across 4 states. 17 years of 7-day weeks, 17 years of missed school plays and cold dinners and phone calls that always took priority over the conversation we were already having. I did not resent it. I understood it. I had married the business as much as I had married the man, and I'd kept both alive in ways that never once appeared in a press release. But that particular night, 22 years ago, none of that history mattered. What mattered was that Robert came home at 11:30, sat down at the kitchen table without taking off his coat, and placed both hands flat on the surface like he was trying to keep the room from spinning. I put the kettle on without asking. I sat across from him without speaking, and after a long time, he said, "We're going to lose it, Maggie. All of it, unless something changes in the next 30 days. The bank had called in a short-term loan, $340,000, due in full. A client representing nearly a third of their annual revenue had walked without notice, and the 2 investors Robert had been courting for months had gone cold after a competitor offered them something newer and shinier. 30 days? $340,000. And a man who had never once asked me for anything sitting at my kitchen table at midnight, looking like he had already lost. I did not sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, but because I was thinking. I lay in the dark next to Robert, who eventually drifted off from exhaustion, and I ran numbers in my head the way I had been quietly doing my entire marriage. I had a head for finance that I never talked about, because early in our life together I learned that when I offered numbers, people heard suggestions, but when Robert offered the same numbers, people heard decisions. So I had stopped offering. I just kept running them silently, keeping track, watching patterns, noticing things. And lying there that night, I noticed something no one else had seen yet. There was a way out. It was not easy and it was not comfortable, but it was there and it was real. And by the time the sun came up, I had it mapped completely. I had a private account. Not a secret exactly, but a quiet one. Over 22 years of marriage, I'd put aside small amounts from the household budget, never more than what felt invisible, never enough to cause a question. It was not a rebellion. It was not distrust. It was the habit of a woman who grew up watching her mother ask permission to buy groceries and decided very early that she would always have a floor beneath her feet that belonged only to her. By that morning, that account held $216,000. The remainder I raised by liquidating 3 investment positions I had opened in my own name before we were married, and by selling the one piece of real estate I had inherited from my grandmother, a small rental property in a town 2 hours north that I had been managing quietly for years, collecting rent, reinvesting returns, saying nothing. I wired the full $340,000 to the business account on a Thursday morning. I told Robert only that I had found a way. I told him not to ask me where it came from, because I knew that if he knew, he would refuse it, and his pride would cost us everything. He didn't ask. He used it. He made the payment, retained the client they had almost lost, and kept the doors open. 6 months later, the business had stabilized. A year after that, it landed the contract with a national distribution chain that changed everything. Within 3 years, Caulfield Logistics had tripled in revenue. Within 5, it had gone from a regional operator to a company that appeared in industry publications. Robert accepted an award at a gala in Chicago and spoke for 11 minutes about vision and resilience and the courage to hold on when everything felt like it was falling apart. I sat at the table in a blue dress and clapped with everyone else. He didn't mention me. I hadn't expected him to. I had told him not to. But that was my choice, made freely, made with love, made in the full knowledge of what it would and would not give me in return. And that is the thing they never understood. The ones who sat in that dining room the night before my husband's funeral, pricing the rugs and calling real estate agents. The thing they never understood is that silence chosen by a strong person is not weakness. It is a strategy. It is patience. It is the long game, played by someone who knows that the truth does not expire, and that paper does not lie, and that every single thing I ever did left a trace somewhere, because I made sure of it. Every wire transfer, every account statement, every letter, every handwritten note on every document that passed through my hands. I kept copies, I kept records, I kept everything, not out of suspicion, not even out of foresight, but out of the same quiet discipline that had kept me standing straight through 40 years of being treated like background. They moved into the house the second day after the funeral. My son Daniel and his wife Clarissa arrived first, with their 2 grown children, and what appeared to be a professionally organized moving checklist. I watched from the upstairs window as they unloaded boxes from their car, boxes they had apparently packed before the burial was even finalized. Clarissa walked through the front rooms with her phone raised, recording. Daniel followed with a legal pad, writing down items with the focused efficiency of a man conducting an inventory audit, which is exactly what he was doing. His son Marcus, 26 years old, and wearing the expression of someone who had been promised something his entire life and was finally here to collect it, moved through the house with a roll of colored stickers, pressing them onto furniture the way a child claims a seat on a school bus. This one's mine, that one's mine. This lamp, this cabinet, this sideboard that my husband and I bought at an estate sale in Vermont on our anniversary trip in 1987 and drove home ourselves with it sticking halfway out the trunk of our old Volvo because we were too excited to wait for delivery. A bright yellow sticker, Marcus's name written on it in black marker. His sister Jade walked behind him with a room scanning application open on her phone, calculating square footage, making notes, speaking in a low voice to Clarissa about load-bearing walls and the cost of opening up the kitchen into the living room. Spa room, she said, or maybe a home office. The light in here is actually decent once you get rid of the drapes. I came downstairs slowly. My knees were bad that week, worse than usual. The way grief compounds everything physical. I made it to the bottom of the stairs and stood for a moment in the hallway of my own home, watching my family remove me from it piece by piece, while I was still standing inside it. No one offered a seat, no one looked up. Clarissa came out of the kitchen holding a tray of champagne flutes and said, brightly and without apology, "We're celebrating Robert's legacy. He built something extraordinary, and now it carries forward." There was a murmur of agreement. Someone said, "And we finally get to do something with this place." Someone else said, "It smells like the past here. We need to air it out." I was directed, not unkindly, but not gently either, toward the mudroom at the back of the house. "There's a chair in there," Clarissa said. "More comfortable for you, away from the noise." The chair was a folding one with a cracked plastic seat. The table was a plastic garden table brought in from the shed. My dinner that evening was a paper plate of reheated food, left on the counter with a plastic fork and a paper napkin. No one sat with me, no one checked. From the dining room I could hear laughter, the clink of glasses, the bright and energetic conversation of people who believed they had already won. She built soup, someone said, and the laughter rose. He built an empire. Let her have the garden and her memories. Does anyone know if we can redirect her pension checks if we keep the address? Another round of laughter. I sat in the mudroom with my paper plate and my plastic fork, and I pressed my fingers against the document folded inside my cardigan pocket, and I let them laugh. I had been letting people laugh for a long time. I had learned that the people laughing the loudest are almost always the ones who haven't read the paperwork. The paperwork in this case was substantial. I had spent the 4 days between Robert's death and the funeral making phone calls, pulling files, and meeting once, quietly, with a woman named Patricia Ose, a senior partner at a firm in the city who had handled my personal legal matters for 16 years. Robert had his lawyers, I had mine. This was another thing the family did not know, had never thought to ask, would never have imagined necessary, because they had decided long ago what I was, and therefore what I was not. I was the wife, I was the background, I was the soup. What I was not, in their telling, was a party to any document that mattered, a signatory on anything significant, a person whose name appeared anywhere that counted. They were wrong about all of it. Patricia had helped me structure things carefully over the years, not deceptively, not in opposition to Robert, but in parallel with him, with his knowledge, with his blessing, in the way that two people who genuinely trust each other sometimes quietly protect each other without making a performance of it. There was a co-ownership clause in the original business trust. My name was there, placed there 15 years ago, when Robert came to me one night and said, "I want you to know you're protected, Maggie, whatever happens." There was the matter of the $340,000, fully documented, fully traceable, structured at Patricia's insistence as a formal loan to the business, because Patricia had said, even if you never intend to collect it, make it a loan, not a gift, because gifts disappear and loans are assets. The loan had been repaid, with interest, into an account in my name. That account had been invested, carefully, quietly, over 2 decades, and it had grown. There was also the matter of intellectual property. This was the piece I had not spoken of to anyone, not to Robert while he was alive, not to Patricia until 3 years ago, when I finally showed her the original documents and watched her go very still and very professional in the way lawyers do when they realize they are looking at something important. 20 years ago, when the business was expanding rapidly and Robert was trying to position Caulfield Logistics for a private equity round, he had struggled with the strategic framework. He knew operations. He understood trucks and routes and warehouses and client relationships. He did not speak the language of institutional investors, and he knew it, and it frightened him. I knew that language. I had learned it before we were married, working for 4 years at a financial advisory firm where I had been, by any honest measure, very good. I had left when we had children, because that was what you did, or what I believed then that you did. And I had carried that knowledge with me into my domestic life, the way you carry a skill you don't use but never forget. Like swimming, like reading a map, like knowing when the numbers don't add up. I wrote the investor framework for Robert's private equity round. I wrote it at the kitchen table over 3 consecutive nights while the house was quiet, working from memory and from the financial publications I had been reading continuously for 20 years because my mind needed something to do with itself. I wrote it under a different name, Eleanor Marsh, a name I invented with no particular significance, just 2 words that felt clean and professional, and entirely unlike a 60-year-old woman in a kitchen in the middle of the night. I mailed it to Robert's office, addressed to him, no return address, with a note that said, "This might help." He brought it to his board. His board approved the strategy unanimously. The private equity round closed 8 months later at a valuation that had not seemed possible 12 months before. Caulfield Logistics used the capital to expand into 2 new regions and signed the partnership that would eventually define the company's national reputation. At dinner, the night after the board approval, Robert had said, "The strangest thing? We received an anonymous strategy document, and it was exactly what we needed. It reads like someone who really understands us. And I had stirred the soup and said, "That's fortunate." And he had looked at me for a moment with an expression I had not been able to read then and had thought about many times since. The document was registered. Patricia had looked into it 3 years ago, when I finally showed her the original drafts, still in my handwriting, still carrying the deliberate idiosyncrasies she told the forensic analyst to look for. The way I closed certain letters, the slight leftward lean on my sevens, the particular spacing of my punctuation. The registration had been done by the patent office under Eleanor Marsh, tied to an address that eventually traced back to a P.O. box I had held in my own name. Patricia had engaged a forensic document examiner, a specialist from a university whose name I will not use here, but whose credentials were beyond challenge. The examiner's report was 31 pages. Its conclusion was 4 words. Authorship is not disputed. The intellectual property rights attached to that framework had been generating licensing income for years, paid into an account under Eleanor Marsh that I had not touched, not once, not a single withdrawal, because I had not needed the money, and because somewhere in the back of my mind I had always known that untouched accounts are louder than touched ones in a courtroom. The total in that account, by the time of the will reading, was $4,812,000, plus interest, plus the value of the licensing rights themselves, which Patricia's team had valued conservatively at 3 times that figure. The will reading was scheduled for a Tuesday. The law offices were modern and cold, glass and steel, and the particular silence of a room where large amounts of money are about to change direction. The family arrived together, which I thought was telling. They had coordinated. Daniel wore a suit I'd never seen before. Clarissa wore a dress that said, "Occasion," without saying grief. Marcus had his legal pad. Jade had her phone. The younger cousins filed in behind them in a loose group that arranged itself, without any apparent discussion, as far from me as the room allowed. I was given a seat at the end of the table, a folding chair, the same model as the one in the mudroom, which I suspected was not coincidental. The family settled themselves in the leather chairs, along the main length of the table, with the easy confidence of people who had already decided how this was going to go. Daniel leaned toward his wife and said something I was not meant to hear, but heard clearly. "She won't make a scene. She never does." He was right about the second part. Robert's lawyer was a man named Gerald Whitmore, 60 years of age, silver-haired, unhurried, with the particular stillness of a man who has delivered news of all kinds to all kinds of people, and long since stopped being surprised by any of their reactions. He opened his briefcase. He arranged his documents. He looked around the room, once, briefly, and his gaze rested on me for just a moment longer than it rested on anyone else. I held his eye. He gave the smallest nod. We had spoken twice by phone in the week since Robert's death. He knew what was in the documents. He also knew what was coming. He began with the standard language, the identification of the deceased, the verification of the will's validity, the legal framework for what followed. The family listened with visible impatience, the way people listen to terms and conditions before clicking accept. Daniel's foot moved under the table. Marcus uncapped his pen. Then Gerald reached into his case and removed a small silver recorder. He placed it in the center of the table. He said, "Before we proceed to the distribution of assets, Robert Caulfield left a personal statement to be played in full at this reading. No one is to speak until it has concluded." He pressed play. My husband's voice filled the room. It was slower than I remembered and quieter, but it was entirely him. The particular cadence of a man who chose his words before he said them. He said, "I have been a fortunate man. I want to be honest about what that means. The fortune was not only mine. The foundation was not only mine. The decisions that saved this company, the capital that kept it alive when it should have died, the strategic thinking that positioned it for everything that came after, those things came from my wife, from Margaret. I was the face. She was the architect. I accepted credit that belonged to her, because it was easier, because the world made it easier, and because she let me, and I'm not proud of that. I want the record corrected. I want my children to understand what they have dismissed, and I want Maggie to know that I knew. I always knew. The room was absolutely still. Daniel's foot had stopped moving. Marcus had put down his pen. Clarissa was looking at the recorder with an expression I can only describe as the face of someone watching the floor disappear beneath them. Gerald stopped the recording. He opened the first folder and began. The primary estate, including the property, the business holdings, the investment accounts and the retirement assets, passes in accordance with the revised trust instrument, which names Margaret Elaine Caulfield as principal beneficiary and co-founder of record. He passed me a folder. It was heavier than it looked. Inside were the deeds, the account transfer authorizations, the business ownership documentation with my name restored to its original position, and a handwritten letter from Robert on his personal stationery. 2 pages, both sides, in the careful handwriting of a man who knew he was running out of time. I did not read it there. I folded it and placed it in my cardigan pocket, next to the document I had carried to that room, like a quiet and confident weapon. Gerald continued. He outlined the secondary distributions to the family, which were specific and deliberate and significantly reduced from whatever they had been expecting. He then placed a second folder on the table and said, "There is an additional matter pertaining to intellectual property." He explained the Eleanor Marsh framework. He explained the forensic analysis. He explained the patent registration and the licensing income and the account balance. He explained it calmly and completely and without drama. And as he spoke, I watched Daniel's face move through several expressions in rapid succession, none of them ones I had seen on him before. When Gerald finished, the room was quiet for a long time. Then Daniel said, "I didn't know." His voice was different, smaller. The suit suddenly looked too large for the man inside it. "I didn't know it was you." I looked at him across the table. This person I had carried home from the hospital 51 years ago, wrapped in a yellow blanket because we didn't know yet, and yellow felt safe for anything. This person I had held through every fever and failure and dark night of his particular life, for whom I had whispered you enough more times than I could count, across more years than he had probably thought about. I looked at him and I said, "I know you didn't," and I meant it, because they had not been cruel out of knowledge. They had been cruel out of a story they had been told, and had chosen never to question. The story that said she is the background, she is the soup, she is the furniture, she is already gone. They had believed it because it was easier than looking, and no one had ever made them look, until now. I gathered my coat, the same beige coat they had called depressing at Christmas. I stood slowly, because my knees are bad, and I will not pretend otherwise, and I buttoned it from the bottom the way I always do. I picked up the 2 folders Gerald had given me. I paused at the door and I turned around once, not for drama, not for effect, just because there was one thing left to say, and I wanted to say it standing up. I said, "I built the foundation and you lived in the house. I hope, when you build your own, you remember what foundations require." Then I walked out into the cold air and I kept walking. The apartment I moved to is small, and it is mine. There are wide windows and white curtains, and on clear mornings, the light comes in at an angle that makes everything look like a painting. I did not take the furniture with the stickers on it. I left all of that behind. What I took was specific. The photograph from our 30th anniversary, the one they had put face down behind the refrigerator. Robert's handwritten letter from the folder, which I have now read many times. The old record player, which Marcus had put a sticker on, and which I had peeled off quietly in the night before the reading, and wrapped in a blanket in the back of the car. And one small rose, cutting from the garden, taken from the one bush that was still alive, wrapped in wet cloth, planted now in a terracotta pot on my windowsill, putting out new growth. The foundation I started 3 months after reading is not large, and it is not loud. It has a simple name and a simple purpose: to find women who have built things quietly and been written out of the story, and to make their names legible again. Scholarships, legal support, documentation assistance, recognition in places where recognition has been withheld. I funded it from the Eleanor Marsh account, the one that sat untouched for years, because I had known somehow, without being able to name it, that it was waiting for a reason. It had a reason now. Every quarter when the licensing payment arrives, a portion goes directly to the foundation. Patricia handles the filings. I handle the decisions. It is, in its own way, the most purely mine thing I have ever built, because this time I built it under my actual name, with my actual face on the about page, with my actual voice in the founding statement, which I wrote myself, at my kitchen table, in the early morning, the way I have always done my best thinking. The founding statement ends with something I have believed for longer than I have been able to say it out loud. It says, "The quiet ones were not silent because they had nothing to say. They were silent because they were protecting something. But protection has a season, and that season ends, and when it does, what was protected gets to finally speak for itself." That is what happened here. That is what is still happening. And if you're reading this and you recognize something in it, something in the waiting, something in the watching, something in the keeping of records that no one knew you were keeping, then I want you to understand one thing clearly. The moment you stop protecting and start claiming is not a betrayal of everyone who came before. It is the completion of everything you have been quietly building toward all along. Most people never reach that moment. They wait too long, or they lose the records, or they believe, finally, the version of themselves that other people wrote. But you are at that moment right now, today, reading this. And you can choose to do what I did. You can reach into your pocket, feel the edge of the document you have been carrying, and walk into the room where the truth is finally allowed to speak. The choice is yours. It always was.